Deborah from Cook Colorful, and we are here for an online cooking class. Today we are going to make Mediterranean falafel bowls, which is one of my family's favorites. We are going to get started with the quick pickled onions. So grab that recipe first. And as a matter of fact, before we do anything, let's preheat our oven to 375 for the falafel so that they'll be all ready to go. We're going to start by making the marinade or the pickle. We're going to take half a cup of apple cider vinegar, and just like what I had told you in the shopping list, you want to get it with the mother. It's fermented, and that fermentation that you see in there has all kinds of good probiotics, but about a half a cup, and I'm pouring it into a sealable bowl. To that, I am adding 1 tablespoon of sweetener. I prefer to use something that's more weight in this particular recipe, like the monk fruit or the erythritol, or even sugar. You're not using that much. It's not going to make a big difference because of the color. I want the color of these onions to be vibrant, pink, and beautiful. And I also have half a tablespoon of kosher salt. I'm just going to throw that into my apple cider, whisk it up, and stir. We're going to kind of keep shaking it up as we go. All right, so now for our radishes and our onion. I'm going to go with about a half of a red onion. So I'm going to just cut right through the root, all the way through, and then I'm going to peel off the top layer till I get down to a nice purple crunchy part. Throw the rest in the sink. Then I'm going to cut off the root end. For this, we're just doing slices. When you're cutting, you want to make a little bit of a claw grip so that your fingertips are not sticking out and in the way. And then you're just going to make thin little slices straight down from the top of the onion to the bottom. As you get to the end, I like to turn it on its side so I have a little bit more to hold on to. And that's it for my onions. Now I'm going to kind of break them up a little bit. So I'm going to throw those right into my container. And then if you're doing one onion, just continue, do the other side of the onion. If you're doing radishes, these have been cleaned. I don't take the skin off or anything. I just cut off the ends. And then, again, you can either, if they're large, you can cut them in half. If they're smaller, just leave them as is. And then you're just going to do small, thin little slivers. If you're doing whole, I like to cut just a little tiny bit off the bottom, so that I have a flat surface to work with. It just makes it easier to cut. And because they're so small, it's a little bit harder to really do your claw grip. So just be really, really careful. And then we'll throw all of these into our container. Then I just seal up my container, turn it over, give it a good shake. And then we're just going to set this aside. And keep it close to you because we're going to shake it every once in a while. All right, so the next thing we're going to start prepping is our Israeli salad to go on top of our bowl. Now, we're going to just get started with the cucumbers at this point because those also we want to let marinate for a little while. So I have a medium-sized bowl. I have my English cucumber. I have my vinegar and my salt and my sugar. Okay. So cucumber's already been cleaned. Hopefully you did the same. I'm just going to cut the ends off. Get rid of those. Now, to make it a little easier to handle, I usually cut the cucumber in half. Then I'm going to stand the cucumber up, and I'm going to cut straight down. So now I have a big flat side on the bottom, so it's easy to cut. Put your hands around the cucumber and around the knife and just cut straight down through the center. So now I have 2 long pieces of cucumber. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. cut straight down through it. So now I have 4 halves of my cucumber. So we're going to just take a spoon. You can use a grapefruit spoon. You can use a teaspoon if you have any kind of small spoon, really. And we're just going to go in there and scrape those seeds right out. I kind of angle my spoon a little bit to the side and just scrape them right out. All right, so we're going to do that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to scrape the seeds out of all 4 of those halves. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take each of these halves, we're going to cut them in half, quarters. The most important thing is that when you're chopping these, they're all about the same size. And I got a little end here on this cucumber that doesn't look so nice, so I'm just cutting that off and throwing it out. All right, so once we have these in strips, we're now going to take maybe 2 or 3 at a time. Don't take too many, whatever you're comfortable handling. And then we're going to cut like 1/2-inch pieces so that they look about like this and throw them into your bag. All right, so we're going to go ahead and chop those up real quickly. All right, so I now have my cucumbers all prepped here and they're chopped and ready to go. So to that, I'm going to add my, let's see here, we've got a 1/2 tablespoon of sugar. Again, use whatever sweetener you like. This one, I do coconut sugar all the time in it. You do not see the brown because it gets mixed in with the salad. So coconut sugar has about 1/2 of the glycemic load of regular sugar. It's a great natural substitute. Again, you can use the monk fruit, you can use stevia. Just try to use a natural sweetener rather than something that's refined. I also have a 1/2 teaspoon. My 50-year-old eyes are failing on me. For this one, I usually use a table salt instead of kosher salt, just because it kind of dissolves and spreads a little bit easier. If you're using kosher salt, that's fine, but just instead of a teaspoon, you might want to go to 1.5 teaspoons, because kosher salt is actually not as salty. Even though it's bigger, it's not as salty as table salt. And that is because it's bigger. There's not as much surface area on the salt crystals, so you don't perceive that salty taste as much. So I'm going to just sprinkle that over the top. All right. And then we're going to go with 2.5 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. All right, so now just take a spoon, any spoon, and give that all a toss. And we're going to set this aside, and we're going to but keep that close also, because this we're also going to give a toss every once in a while. Oh, it looks like somebody's got a helper. It's a great activity to do with your kids, and people have told me that their kids have never eaten more vegetables than when they've done these classes with them. So get the kids involved. It's lots of fun. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to start working on is our falafel. All right, so we are going to start with our chickpeas that hopefully everybody soaked and has ready to go. So I soaked mine right here in a pot. I'm just going to take a strainer over the sink here, and I'm going to pour the water out of those. All right, we only lost one. All is good. So we're going to take those and we're going to throw them into our food processor. Just that simple. You should have already rinsed them. So from here, we are going to add all of our herbs, including our onion. We only need about half of an onion. Again, peel off the outer layer. This doesn't have to be beautifully chopped. We're throwing it into the food processor. I'm just going to cut each end off. Just to make processing easier, I'm going to cut it into a really rough chop, like fourths, and throw it in there. It's all good. Now we need 4 cloves of garlic. So I have a whole head here. Can you see there? I'm going to peel off the outer layers. Once you peel off most of those outer layers, you can actually put it on its side, put your hand over it, and kind of put your weight into it, push down on it, and those cloves start to come apart. So now I'm going to grab, that's actually 2, 3, 4. And again, we're making this the way you like it. So if you like a lot of garlic and you want to put an extra garlic clove in, that's fine. If you're not a fan of garlic, leave one out. So your garlic, now that you have your cloves, take your knife, make a fist closed so that you don't get your fingers in there. Give it a little hammer and do that on each of your garlic cloves. If they smash, that's okay. They're all just going into the food processor. So we're just going to take the skin right off of there and throw them in. This one the skin doesn't want to come off. If the skin doesn't want to come off, the best trick is cut the little stem off, and then the skin usually just falls right off. All right, we are going to add, I'm going to grab the recipe so I don't mess this up. In here I have a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne. If you are not a fan of heat, these are not particularly spicy. I think you can go ahead with a 1/4 teaspoon and not be afraid. If you're afraid, leave it out. It's not the end of the world. If you like spicy, you can go to a 1/2 teaspoon. But we got a 1/4 teaspoon in here. 2 teaspoons of cumin, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper, a 1/2 teaspoon of coriander, a little bit of cardamom, and when I say a pinch, I would say up to about 1/8 teaspoon. I really like the flavor of it, so I went to about 1/8 teaspoon here. And that's what's in this little bowl. So I'm going to add all of those. Okay, the other thing that I'm adding here is my 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And we put baking soda in there because it just kind of makes the falafel fluffy and light. And next is our lemon juice. Now we're going to need lemon juice for our next recipe also, so I'm going to go ahead and squeeze 2 lemons probably. We're going to see. We're going to need about 3 tablespoons between the 2 recipes. I'm going to just cut my lemon in half, and I have a lemon squeezer, juicer, thingy-dingy that I'm going to use. Here's a trick that I learned from Alton Brown. If you don't have a squeezer, you can actually use tongs, just regular kitchen tongs, and put them around your lemon like this, and it gives you a handle to squeeze. It works really well. The only downside is that you have to get the seeds out yourself. So I'm going to do it with my handy dandy squeezer, and I'm going to do it right over this little guy. All right, so for our falafel, we only need 2 teaspoons. So I'm going to take 2 teaspoons out of here, and the rest I'll save for later. All right, next we're going with our herbs. And I have these beautiful herbs here. I have cilantro and I have flat leaf parsley. And again, you can put in as much as you like. About a 1/2 cup is a really nice amount. Your falafel's not going to be super green. It's going to have a little bit of you're going to see the herbs, but it's not going to be green. If you like a lot of herbs, throw more in. All right, so I have a big bunch. I'm not going to use all of this. I'm going to probably take about a 1/2 of it. The big stems, I'll just rip right off and throw those. The rest of it, I'm just throwing right into the food processor. Same thing with the parsley. I'm going to use about 1/2 of this bunch. I'm going to take off the big stems, just rip, and then throw that in. Okay, so that's a great question. When you start with dried chickpeas and you soak them, you're basically bringing them back to their natural state. When you buy them in the can, they're already cooked, so they're soft. And they're not going to make the same texture for your falafel, which is why I specified don't use canned, use dried. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put my top onto my food processor. Now, when I do this, I pulse. I don't just blend, because what we want to do is we want to break this down, and I'm going to take the lid off and show you multiple times so you can see. We want it somewhere between like a couscous and like a fine sand. You're really looking for something that sticks together almost like a paste, okay? So we're gonna pulse. And we're gonna grab a spatula and just wipe it down on the sides so it's all combined together. And right now, it's definitely a little bit too big still, but I wanted you to see where we are. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few more pulses here. And you can see when I try to push it that mine is sticking together already. So I'm not going to have to add any water to this. But if yours is dry, add a tablespoon of water. I'm doing good. I'm going to do a little bit more. You don't want to turn this into hummus, but you want it to be as fine as you can. All right. It's looking good in here. I think I'm good. If anybody wants to show me in your camera your food processor bowl, I'm happy to take a look and give you feedback as to if it's fine enough. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to take this off, slide this out of the way so you can see a little bit better. And I'm going to show you how we're going to start to form these. Now, what we're going to do is take a little bit of oil. You can use avocado oil, olive oil. I like avocado oil because it doesn't oxidize at a low temperature. The heating point, the smoking point is the word I'm trying to think of. The smoke point is very high. It's over 500 degrees. So it's great to use when you're putting it in the oven. This is only going up to 375. So if you want to use olive oil, you can do that and it's just fine. And I'm going to just use a little brush and smear this around a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit more in here, just so I get all the edges. So I'm going to pull the blade out of here so I don't hurt myself. And then I'll use my spatula and just make sure it's all down at the bottom. Now, you want to make balls that are about golf ball size. So you can just use a regular teaspoon out of your drawer. If you have like a little cookie press, this is about a tablespoon. So you can use this. Rounded, you're going to need about 2 tablespoons. Or you could even use just a regular tablespoon measuring spoon, and that would be fine too. So I'm going to use the cookie press. You can see I'm pretty well rounded there. Make it into a ball and then flatten it. So you've got little discs. And then just lay that down. And it's that easy. This is a fun one for the kids. Oh, somebody asked why flat discs and not round. So they do typically, when you think of falafel, you think of round. Because we're baking, we want to increase the surface area that they're going to get to cook and be in contact with the oil. So that's why we do them in flat discs. If you were frying them in oil, then you could easily do them round. Yep, I got one that fell apart, so I'm just going to grab it back up, squeeze it again, reshape it. It happens, no big deal. So they should be, your little discs should be about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch thick. About 3 fingers width, something like that. I'm getting down to the bottom, so I'm just gonna stick my hand in there now. Make sure you don't stick your hand in there if the blade is in there. Okay, now, here's the last thing we're gonna do with our falafel before we stick them in the oven. Just like we have oil on the bottom, we want a little bit of oil on top. So I'm gonna take a small bowl, put just a tablespoon or 2 of oil into it. Same oil we did on the bottom. And I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to just tap the top with a little bit of oil. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stick these in the oven. If yours are all ready, do the same. We're going to, when you do so though, set a timer for 15 minutes. At 15 minutes, we're going to flip them over and we're going to cook them for another 15 minutes. If yours are small, maybe do a 10-minute timer. Okay? In the meantime, shake up your onions and your radishes, or just your onions, depending on what you made. Take your cucumbers and give them a stir. All right, we're going to go ahead. Achi, you ready? Aurelia, you ready? Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to grab a small mixing bowl and we're going to take about a 1/2 cup of our tahini. Again, not an exacting measure. You can use dry or liquid on this. It doesn't, we're not baking, it doesn't really matter. And throw that into our bowl. So now we have our 2 tablespoons, or we have our lemon juice from earlier. We're going to use 2 tablespoons of lemon juice here. And actually, this tells me it is 2 tablespoons, but we can measure it just to be sure. Excellent. To that, we're going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. Don't add the water yet. Just a sprinkling of salt and a little bit of pepper. If you like garlic, which I do, this is a great place to add a clove of minced garlic. You guys want to add garlic or no garlic? I got a thumbs up for garlic. All right, so I'm going to grab another garlic clove. Now I'm going to grab a microplane, which is this. You can also just chop it, but I like to use a microplane, or if you have a garlic press, you can use that. You just want to get the garlic as small as possible because it is going into a sauce. I don't know about you, but I don't like a big chunk of garlic. All right. So we're going to give that a stir. And you'll see that the lemon juice kind of makes the tahini thick. So we're going to add some water to that. We're going to start with 4 tablespoons. And we'll see how that goes. Different tahinis sometimes need more or less. This one is definitely thicker than the one I usually use, my own. You can also do this in a blender. And I actually find it usually needs a little bit more water in a blender because whisks it or mixes it so hard, it really emulsifies it. Now, like I said, my tahini was thicker than what I usually use, so I'm going to need, I think, both of these extra tablespoons. So 2 extra tablespoons in here. Remember to post any questions. All right, so with my extra 2 tablespoons of water, that looks perfect. It should be runny, but, you know, like thick runny. And as this sits, before we put our bowls together, it might thicken a little bit more. So you'll just add another tablespoon of water or so to make it the way you like. So I'm going to set this aside too. And the last thing we need to do while our falafel is cooking, I've got about 5 more minutes on mine before I flip them, which means if you made really small ones, you're probably about ready to flip. So we are going to finish up our Israeli salad. When I went to the store, they did not have grape tomatoes, so I got this lovely package of heirloom medley cherry tomatoes, and some are big and some are small. It doesn't matter. You can use cherry tomatoes, you can use grape tomatoes. You just want to cut them to about the same size as your cucumbers. So, the small ones I'm just going to cut in half, because that's the size of your typical grape tomato. The larger ones I'm going to cut in 4ths. When cutting tomatoes, I'm using a different knife now, if you can see. This one actually has a little bit of a serrated edge. Serrated knives are great for tomatoes. They cut right through the skin really easily. So I have a pint here. I'm going to use about a half of these. And again, we're not baking, we're cooking. So if you like more tomatoes, add more tomatoes. If you're not a fan of tomatoes, just put a few in. It's not an exact science. Ooh, that's a teeny tiny one. All right, my buzzer is going off here, so we're hitting 15 minutes. So I am going to take a spatula and a mitt, because they're going to be hot coming out of the oven. Turn off my timer so it's not beeping at us. And you can see they've kind of fluffed a little bit, which is what we're looking for. That's the baking soda. I'm going to try to stand out of the way here so that you can see. And as I flip them over, they're nice and golden brown now on the bottom. All right, so I'm taking my mitt. I'm pushing this back in. And we're going to go for another 15 minutes. Here's my cucumbers and tomatoes now. And I'm just going to give it a quick toss so I can see proportionally how many tomatoes I have. And I think I'm going to add a few more. I like a few more tomatoes than that. I think because some of them are cherry, they're a little bit bigger. So let me grab some of these smaller ones. Give that another toss. Now that looks like a nice balance to me. And now we need to do our onion and our mint. So grab my knife. We are going to do a half of a red onion. So again, we're going to cut straight through. This time we're going to keep the root on the onion. So don't cut the root off. If you have stalk on this side, you can cut that off, although I don't really have it, so I'm going to just leave it alone. You guys ready for the big onion technique? I'm not cutting off the root, the hairy root end. Keep that on. It's going to hold the onion together as we chop it, okay? And we want a nice fine chop, so it's going to really make it much easier to keep that on. So what we're going to do is put the onion flat side down, hold your knife parallel to your cutting board, and you're going to make thin slices. Hold it close to you. If you hold it out, your hand gets in the way. So hold it close to you and go straight through. You're not going to cut into the root. You're not cutting all the way through, but you're cutting almost to the root. And you're going to do 2 or 3 cuts, because remember, we want nice fine cuts of our onion. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces I turned this one into. But it's still held together by the root. So now, with the root away from you, we're going to start slicing straight down into this onion. And again, we want the cuts to be close together because we want a small chop. We don't want big pieces of onion in our salad, so we want to make as many slices as we can. And again, you're not going to go through the root, just close to it. And if some of those pieces of onion start to come out on you, that's okay. No big deal. Okay, so now we're going to turn the onion so that it's sideways, so that your root is by your grip hand and the other end is by your knife hand. You can use your claw grip again, and now we're just going to cut right down through small slices again so that we have small pieces of onion. So now you have your finely chopped red onion. So we're going to add that to our bowl. Let me bring my bowl over so you can see a little bit better. Scoop that up right on your knife and add that to your bowl. All right, I'm going to set my salad aside one more time, and I have my mint here. I love mint. I put mint in everything, including water. It's great. Just throw a sprig right into your water and it tastes fantastic. All you do for the salad to get the mint off the leaves is hold the top of your stem and run your hand right down the stem. I, of course, did it backwards that time. Couldn't see it was so bushy. Throw away your big stem. There's a little stem. Pull that out. All right? And that's probably good. I'm actually going to, because I like mint on my bowls, I like to sprinkle some on top. I'm going to put a little extra mint in here and just go ahead and chop it up. So that's up to you. If you're a mint lover like I am, put in a little bit more. You can always use it on top of your bowl. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand on top of my knife. Make sure you're not wrapping it around. You want a flat hand. Put the tip of your knife down, flat hand on top, and you're just going to go right down through your mint leaves. Mint is a weed, so if you're growing it at home, like I do, my suggestion is to grow it in pots because it grows like crazy. So when you're chopping, just like you see, I'm going one direction and then the next. Kind of go through one way and then turn your knife 90 degrees. Go the other way. Kind of put them back into a pile. Do it again. All right. And I had some big pieces stuck to my knife, so I'm going to just do a couple more chops. And then I'm going to take almost all of that and throw it into my salad. I'll save just a little bit for the top of our bowls. And then we're going to just toss that all together. Look how pretty all those colors look. So to this, we want to add just a tablespoon or so of a nice, good quality olive oil. What you're looking for when you're buying an olive oil, just a drizzle or a tablespoon if you want to measure it. What you're looking for when you're buying an olive oil is you want to make sure that it has a date. You want it to be cold pressed so that you know it hasn't been processed with heat. And you want it ideally to be organic. So give that another toss with the oil. And then we're going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. Remember, your cucumbers had salt in it. We salted those earlier, so you're not going to need a ton of salt. If you're trying to limit your salt, I would taste it now and see how you like it before you add any more. If you're not limiting salt, you're probably going to want a little bit more. It's just going to brighten up the flavors, but you're not going to need a lot, just a little sprinkle. A little bit of freshly ground pepper. Sure. So I'm going to give that a quick taste. My buzzer just went off again. Good. I'm going to throw that into the sink and set this aside. And let me check my falafel. What you'll see when you open up your oven is that even the top side has gotten a little bit browner now. And the bottom side is nice and golden. Looks perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and take those out and set them aside to cool. All right, well, we are ready to put our bowls together. Now, in my bowl, you can see I had already prepared some kale. Hopefully you guys prepared whatever you're using as your base. I'm using kale. I also made some brown rice. So I'm going to use a little bit of brown rice. Give that a fluff. And just throw that right on top. And then I'm going to take, I'll grab a clean spoon since I tasted with that spoon. Give my Israeli salad one more stir. And then I like to put a little bit, because it's so pretty and colorful, I like to put a little bit of the Israeli salad in each corner. Again, if you wanted to use chicken or shrimp or some other protein, that's a great, you can always add to this. This is a vegetarian option, but if you like that stuff, you're welcome to add it. Our quick pickled onions and radishes. I'm going to give those a quick stir, but you can see what a beautiful pink color they are now, just with that little bit of time. That's all it takes, is about an hour. Now, when you're serving these, you don't want to serve the vinegar that they're in. You just want the onions. But if you don't use them all, you can store them in that vinegar. You can also reuse that vinegar, so you don't have to throw it away. Once you're done with the onions, you can use it as a base for a mayonnaise or for a salad dressing. All right, so we'll take a little bit of that. Put a little bit of those in each corner. And I'm going to just lay those across the top. I'm going to grab my lemon tahini sauce, and it has gotten thick again, so I'm going to grab just a little bit of filtered water, and I'm going to just drizzle a little bit in there, about a tablespoon. Give it a whisk, and that's all I needed. So now we're going to just drizzle that right over top. And then I'm going to add a little bit of fresh mint. And there's my dinner. You can also add, if you like feta cheese, feta's great on top of here. You could do different herbs. If you like different herbs, you could add some spicy harissa if you like harissa. You can put olives on there, anything you like. But here we have our Mediterranean bowl. So grab a fork, take a bite, and let me know what you think. you know what? You learn each time you do it, and you get a little bit better at it. So it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. You get a little bit better each time. That's awesome. Certainly. All right.